Hello and welcome to Analysis. I am Deji Badimasi. Nigerian public universities will soon be shutting down as lecturers across the country are mobilizing for an indefinite strike action unless, of course, the Academic Staff Union of Universities reach some kind of last-minute settlement with the federal government. Now, the cause of the face-off this time, according to Asuu, is the non-implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding it signed with the federal government since 2008. After a series of strikes, which always ended with the federal government giving assurances during negotiations, Asuu went on its most protracted strikes now in March of 2020. The union eventually called off that strike in December 2021 after the unimplemented MOU was renamed Memorandum of Action, MOA. It is now 14 months since that agreement, and Asuu says the federal government has only released 55 billion naira to partially address the issues of end allowances and universities revitalization. The promise to deploy the University Transparency and Accountability Solution, UTAS, rather than the federal government's payroll system, the Integrated Payroll and Personal Information System, IPIS, has not been fully activated. Asuu is, of course, unhappy that, among other things, even the end allowances, universities revitalization funding and deployment of UTAS have not been satisfactorily implemented. So the union is threatening to begin another indefinite strike action anytime soon. Joining me on the program now to discuss this further is the president, of course, of Asuu, Emmanuel Osadeke. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on the program. Let me start by asking you this, sir. When are we likely to see another strike, or what can be done to avert another strike, the impending strike?
Thank you very much. We have not used the word strike. What we are saying is that we have reached a number of agreements, number of memoranda of understanding, and a number of memoranda of action. The difference between memoranda of understanding and memoranda of action is that of action have deadline, have timeline from which issue will be resolved. But all those timelines have elapsed, and most of the issues have not been resolved. So when we are meeting, the neck of our union, which is the one that had the authority to either declare any action, it will be meeting very soon. And after that meeting, the neck will look at the issues the way they are, and then take its decision.
But let me ask you this, Prof. Has the government spoken with you? What is the government doing at the moment to avert any action at all from your union, whether it's a strike or whatever? Is the government talking to you as we speak to ensure that you don't take any action at all that will probably shut down universities in this country?
The only group of government that have talked to us in recent time is NIREC, Nigeria Interreligion Council. The government, none of the government agency have talked to us or reached to us or have explained to us what they are doing in the past 3 months. So since we declared this as our members, in October we have to shift it. In November we have to shift it because of the intervention of NIREC. Until now, we not get any official response from any of the government agency. That's how bad it is. All I've heard today is that one of the ministers is saying that Asuu is trying to blackmail the government. If you sign an agreement, you sign a memorandum of understanding, and you agree you do a number of things, and you didn't do it, should those people you are dealing with be quiet? Instead of using language that could at least talk to or reach out to people, you are going to add that you're talking about blackmail or talking about whatever it is. It's so sad that people have in government.
Let me ask you this, Prof. Let's even talk about that memorandum of action. I mean, the issue of the revitalization of universities, the end allowances and all of that. How much, in terms of percentages now, how much of those issues now have been addressed in terms of percentages?
Thank you very much. You can do the percentage yourself. In 2009, we reached the agreement. In 2013, we reached an understanding, a memorandum of understanding with the good Lord Jonathan government that every year they will release 120 billion naira to revitalize university. And we do that over 5 years. Plus the initial 200 billion they will release initial title, making 1.3 trillion. That regime released 200 billion in 2014. And since then and now, the successive government have only released just about 50-something billion out of 1.1 trillion naira. That gives you less than 20% of what they have released. That is the crisis. So whenever we meet, they'll give you, we'll do this. But once the strike is over, we have gone back, they just abandon it because the public institution it's not their concern. We know why? Because it does not affect them. Their children are not here. Their relations are not here. They're all schooling abroad. Where government take the decision serious, but here we don't take it serious.
But
that is the issue. So they have less than 20%.
Is it also the case that after every negotiation, that Asuu just goes back to sleep, if you like, and you do nothing, you just wait on the federal government until the federal government responds or calls you? What actions do you normally take, or what efforts do you make to get the federal government to implement, to ensure that the government the government now keeps to its own side of the bargain? Or do you just wait until the time elapses before you now come out to start making this threat now to go on strike?
Thank you very much. If you have watched since 2014, when the first tranche was released, you know have given less than 100 letters to the government to remind them, not less than 100. And we can give you the document if you want. Not less than 100 letters to the government to remind them of what they have not done. Do you know how also a back on warning strikes just to push them up? Do you know how such audiences with all with the National Assembly, with the ministers? If you recall, between 2020 and now, we met with the Senate President, who promised he will intercede. In 2021, we met with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who also promised he will intercede. We have met with the Minister of Labor more than 10 times, and we agreed on what to do. We met with the Minister of Education. And what do you expect us to do? Having done all this, mobilize even the public, we will mobilize them. We have issued press statements. We have had audience with the press. My immediate successor would have appeared in your program more than 10 times to bring the government attention to it. And nothing is done. What do you want us to do?
Let me ask you this, Prof.
Yeah.
Could it be that this is difficult for the federal government to handle because state governments are involved? I mean, we're not just talking about federal universities here. We're talking about state universities as well. So, I mean, it's obviously it's not going to be easy at all to handle this kind of negotiation where you have 36 state governments now involved, especially the states now with state universities. Could that be the bone of contention here? Could that be where the difficulty is for the government?
Definitely not. When we negotiate, the pro-chancellor of universities are those who negotiate on behalf of government. The pro-chancellor of federal and state university are invited to that, constitute the government team that negotiate with us. So the states are carried along. It's not as if the states are carried along. They're all aware. And even with time, during this period of our administration, the chairman of State Governor Forum have also interceded. I will discuss with them, present these cases to them, and they promise to intercede and nothing.
Finally, before I let you go, I mean, because the states are involved, how much, in terms of meeting your demands now, how much of your demands have the federal government actually met on their own side compared to that of the states?
Well, the government, there are two critical issues now that our members are looking at. The renegotiation of the agreement, which was not done. Nothing has been done about it. When we finish the negotiation in 2021 May, to just look at it and revert back to us. If they agree, they sign. If they don't agree, they tell us the issue. They have not reverted back.
Oh, okay, so you want to renegotiate the agreement of 2008?
Of 2019, we have done that already. We and the government team reached an agreement in May 2021. Then the government team went back to their principal, which is the government, to say, this is what we negotiated. Do you agree? If you don't agree, let us know so that we can go back to them. They have not come back to today. Then we will take on the IPs and UTAS. UTAS, we have completed our own side. We are giving to them. They said they have tested, and the thing was positive, and they said they will not implement. Until they raise issues, even going as far as plagiarism, going to lift people's work to add to their report to show that the report is not positive. So that is where we are. So on the government side, the two critical issues have done nothing. Absolutely nothing. And they are very vital As we speak today, most of the lecturers are leaving the country. If you heard recently, NUC said in the whole of Nigerian university, private, state, and federal, we have only 100,000 lecturers. When we needed more than 200,000. So that is the problem, because they are leaving, and nobody is coming in from outside the country to come and join us. So if we continue like this, in the next 10 years, Nigeria will be grounded. Whether there's a strike or no strike, it will be grounded. Because you will not have the manpower to lecture in the university. Except they want to go and bring all this third class and HND and what have you to come and lecture in university, which is against the rule of the universality of a university.
It's a very sad situation. But just before I let you go, let me ask what your reaction would be to the National Association of Nigerian Students now. They actually addressed a press conference recently asking you to actually dialogue with the government and not to embark on strike, because the question is can there be no alternative to strike action?
We have asked Nigerian, the press, the student, everybody to tell us the alternative. We don't just go on strike. We use all the available means. In the past 3 weeks, we have been sensitizing the public. What I'm aware, in the press, in demonstration and what have you, has government responded? 2, when in the same situation we're students, we also react. We also ensure that we fight for the system. Why would the students just pretend that universities are okay? When you have 16 students staying in one hostel, when you have 1,000 students staying in one lecture hall, with many sitting on the bare floor, sitting on windows, and are they happy about that? Are the parents happy about it? You graduate engineering, you don't have access to lab one day and have your equipment to yourself. Is that what we need in the country? We have a country where roads, building will collapsing on daily basis. Is that what we want? The public should know that the way we are heading, we continue this way. Even the doctors you are seeing, who do not have access to enough cadaver and people, you'll be seen with a doctor who didn't have enough practical to treat you, and they will treat you and will pay the price.
And I mean, I can't but agree with you that in terms of infrastructure, something needs to be done. I can understand what Asuu is asking for, especially when you consider the recent incident at the Obafemi Awolowo University, where a student actually fell into a septic tank and died. I mean, it's something that shouldn't have happened. That is how critical it is.
That is how critical it is. That you don't have a well, you have a soccer well in the university that is open, a student can fall into. Would you have that in primary school in the 70s or 80s? That is how critical it is. And the Nigerian people don't take it serious. They believe we are just talking. They believe that strike is the problem. That girl that died is a symptom of the problem we are talking about. That is just one of them, and there are so many. Those are the symptoms we are talking about. And if we don't take action, we don't force this government to do what they should do, we'll start having so many of them.
Well, Professor Emmanuel Osedeke, President Asuu, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. So the much talked about Presidential Executive Order 10 has finally been voided by Nigeria's apex court. The Supreme Court declared the Executive Order 10, which allows the federal government to deduct from the consolidated revenue accounts now money meant for state judiciary and legislature and pay same directly to them. Now the Supreme Court says that executive order is unlawful and unconstitutional. President Muhammadu Buhari now had signed the order into law in May 2020 to guarantee financial autonomy for state legislature and judiciary, saying it would strengthen the institutions at the state level to make them more independent. The move was, however, rejected by the state governors who challenged the Executive Order 10 at the apex court, asking the court to compel the federal government to take up funding of capital projects and recurrent expenditure for state high courts, Sharia courts, and of course, Sharia Court of Appeal now and Customary Court of Appeal. The governors argued that the three courts were the courts of the Federation, and as such, the funding of their capital projects and recurrent expenditure should be borne by the federal government. Now, they also appealed for an order of the apex court now to compel the federal government to pay them 66 billion naira, being an amount they have so far spent on capital projects for the three courts. Of course, the court has now ruled that President Muhammadu Buhari now exceeded his constitutional powers in issuing Executive Order 10. It also dismissed the 66 billion suit filed by the governors, meaning the funding of state courts now lies squarely with the states. Joining me now to discuss the implication of the Supreme Court verdict on the autonomy for state judiciary and legislature is legal practitioner Malachi Ogumaru. Thank you very much, Malachi, for joining us on the program. Just give me your take on the decision of the Supreme Court on this matter.
Well, I look at it from three perspectives. One is the triumph of democracy, founded on constitutional democracy. The other is the triumph of the rule of law. And the third is the interplay between the executive and the judiciary in that democratic experiment. So let's take it from the perspective of the executive order. The executive order was made with a view to operationalizing what they felt was expressly stated under Section 121, subsection 3.
Which of course the governors have not been complying with anyway. I mean, which the governors have not been complying with.
Very well. Now, the fact that this matter is even brought before the judiciary, which is sought to be protected, the autonomy of whom is also sought to be promoted, gives you the nuances of democracy in a way that suggests that you might be well-intended, but if you act contrary to the rule of law, contrary to the express provisions of the Constitution, that your good intention will be struck down. This is what has played out. So the executive, as represented by the president, is motivated, inspired by the best of desire to ensure that there is considerable measure of autonomy, of independence, particularly of the judiciary, no less of the legislature at the state level. Yet, the judiciary has stepped in as an arbiter in the operationalization of constitutional democracy to say, yes, that may be a well-intended objective. However, you have overreached yourself. You lack the virus, that is the power, to make executive orders binding subnational and federating units. I think that is at the heart of what I just happened. So, on the one hand, no one would blame Mr. President. He may be accused of having the wrong legal advice, or rather the quality and content of the advice he gets is not such that can stand the test of the crucibles of judicial interpretations. This is what we have seen now. However, much as your desires are apt and adequate and desirable in the circumstance, where it fails the test of legality, particularly the rule of law, it's bound to fall in a constitutional democracy. And that, for me, is the beauty.
Okay, let me ask you this now. Let me ask you this now. The truth is that the judgment, as good as it is, the verdict of the Supreme Court, as good as it is, still does not cure a problem. That's the problem of getting state governments now to comply with the Constitution. It's a problem that is still there. So how do we resolve that problem? How do we get state governors to comply with the provision of the Constitution as far as the issue of autonomy now for the judiciary and legislature at the state level is concerned? Because it's expressly provided. I mean, Section 121, subsection 3 that you talked about is very clear. But the truth is that it's been observed in violation. So how do we address that problem?
So, my brother, this is where the craft of statesmanship comes in. This is where the dynamism of leadership comes in. This is where you require political sagacity. And how does it work? It works in a way by which a government, this time around APC, in the preponderance of the states, will decide to go beyond executive orders, come together, properly understand what the issues are, even have stakeholders meeting with even the judiciary. The judiciary is part of the government. To say, wait a minute, we have had issues regarding this aspect of our democratization process. It has posed serious challenges at the state level. And by the way, this is not the only challenge we have. I have just finished a lecture for the Presidential Advisory Committee, in which we have identified numerous such contradictions, including the fact that National Judicial Council is still neck deep involved in the appointment of headship of courts at the state level. That is contradictory to the principles of federalism. Now, coming back to this point, it is that the APC government and leadership is in the majority of the institutions of government, particularly the legislature. So if the executive have this idea, they can gather and have inter-arm interaction. When I mean arm, I'm talking of arms of government, and say this is the problem we have identified. We need not go by the route of executive order. We mainly have to have this understanding and ensure that monies meant for the judiciary as well as the House of Assembly of each of the states should go to them directly. And like the Constitution says, in the case of the judiciary, it shall go to the heads of the judiciary. So what has been struck down is not the idea, it's not the principle. It is the executive order.
Don't you think at this point, don't you also think, sorry to interject.
Of this whole thing,
yeah.
Supreme Court is finding out that you don't have the right, you don't have the virus, you don't have the capacity to promulgate executive orders from the federal government binding the sub-regional government.
Don't you also think that at this point, the national lawmakers too should, that the National Assembly, for instance, can amend that section of the Constitution and probably, introduce a clause that would enforce the compliance now with the provision of the Constitution. Don't you think that's also another angle that should be considered?
Well, in the long run, that could be, but Deji, you and I have shared my view regarding this piecemeal constitutional amendment that we are embarking on. And I had written extensively that we cannot solve the problems of this country by the amendments we are proposing. It is endless. I had the privilege in 1999, even before I was called to the Nigerian bar, to review this constitution at the Abia State University during their law week. There are countless provisions in this constitution that must go down if we can point in the direction of the 1999 constitution, by the way, Decree 24, May 24 of 1999. So this, on the last count, we have had four alterations, and we are still amending. A few days ago, the second reading regarding education qualification, it has passed the second reading. So how it is endless, I can't tell you that, and that's why people say it is a fraud. What we need, except that we are shying away from it, is an autonomous constitution driven by the will of the people and emanating from the people through effective deliberations on all of these things we are talking about. So yes, ultimately, amendment can happen, but I can assure you, 2 weeks after that time, there will be need for further amendments. but let's face it as it is. I'm saying political sagacity, political exigencies, political expediencies requires that as a political party, having the preponderance of members dominating the legislature can come together and have interaction.
You know that can't happen. You know that can't happen. I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult for that to happen. I mean, we're talking about a party now that is even squabbling over the electoral bill now. So it's difficult to see that happen. And maybe the best way would be the best way would be to amend the constitution, because the APC may be in the majority today. Tomorrow it might be the PDP or some other party, and then you would still have that problem there.
No, but Deji, if you take into account the fact that all the parties participated, when I say all the parties in this constitution, I mean in reading and operating this constitution, you would find, and that is the essence of lobbying. That is the essence of it's a marketplace of ideas. Let people see the purpose of this effort. In fairness to Mr. President, he meant well. In short, he has taken, if you like, a good step in the wrong direction or through the wrong means. And that goes to the quality and content of advice, legal advice that he gets. I say that with all seriousness and responsibility, sense of responsibility. Therefore, I imagine that it is not every matter that surfaces that needs to go through constitutional amendment. Otherwise, we won't exit this. And it takes so much. There are certain aspects of the Constitution that you seek to amend that cannot happen except you have the concurrence, the 2/10 majority or concurrence of even the federative nation. So, assuming that is it, what happens for that long time expected to deal with this? It will mean that it will be business as usual. I'm talking about political sagacity. Yeah. I'm talking about political exigencies and expediency.
A political solution.
Like this, we can rise above partisan considerations and deal with the soul of our nation. Thank you.
Malachi Ogumaru, thank you very much for joining us on the program and for sharing your thoughts with us on this very controversial issue. Thanks a lot for your time.
Always a pleasure, sir. Always a pleasure.
All right. Well, that's how much we can take on the program this week. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.